information in regards to how long or how many years it's going to take. The fundamental premise behind it is there's no formula of when a state needs to begin to change. But when the people are willing to band together and actually fight an oppressive government that is taking them so many years to finally gain any capital, any incentive, or the hint of possibility that they might be able to create a change, we should embrace that. Because the dictators who stay forever are always going to lead to worse outcomes. We acknowledge there's been deaths in the short term, but at the same time, for the years of dictators that have existed, there's been hidden deaths of minorities over and over again. That number is just, we can't even comprehend it because we don't even know. But we fundamentally know there's been oppressive governments onto those minorities that actually exist. Firstly, in regards to rebuttal. Let's talk about this metric of numbers of lives and can they hang their hat really on it. First, they said that there is a large amount of deaths and the governments are unstable. Yes, we are happy to buy that. We think that's absolutely fine. We think there is going to be a byproduct of any revolution when you would fight the stable government that actually exists. But secondly, they occur under the status quo. You don't acknowledge the ability for minorities that are currently oppressed exist for those people. That Mubarak was able to massacre thousands of minority groups whenever there was a possibility or a hint of opposition group. You didn't have the ability to actually know that they're going to band together or gain traction as a body. They then said, in regards to democratic will, is it really being exercised when it was the 14 million in Cairo? Oh, what utter shit, right? When there is 14 million people protesting in the streets, that's pretty clear it's democratic will. But let's take them at their strongest, that it's not pure democratic will. We showed you it's enough in this debate to say there needs to be some more participation in the governmental system. We said we didn't have to prove 100% democracy in this debate. But we needed to show that there is enough of incentive for the government now to listen to those types of people to create the change to form government. The answer isn't in regards to what happens. There's no such thing as a premature revolution because those minority parties never have the ability to work together. If there was a pocket of opposition, what happened under the status quo? As soon as they were a king, they were massacred, they were exiled, they left. It fundamentally draws over 30 years the brain drain that exists of those people who want to fight that government leave. They move out of those states if they're not massacred and killed. But also the people realize that every time that you want to protest, or in your small group or in your minority, that your parents, your families, and your friends are going to be the ones that are massacred. When you can band people together, that's the ability. They then told us, well, you didn't have a set platform of what actually wants to exist and what goes forward. Yeah, sure, of course we didn't, because they realised that there is one chance to overthrow the government, and then the secondary question becomes, how do we actually work? It's an absolute fallacy to say in this debate that any government post the Arab Spring has not listened to their people more. There's been disagreements, we completely agree, but any government that's going to have some form of participation has that ability to negotiate and work together. That's the benefit that actually exists. Now I want to talk in regards to substantive material general.
You can never overcome historical ethnic division when you live in a country where a fight for control of resources is a fight for life. How do you fix that problem?
The fact of the matter is, there is at least some discussion that also exists, but also there is a fundamental right to life now that if you want to split up economic resources at their best, that if you have the ability to lobby a government that you can therefore vote for and you have a participation in, you can actually create some sort of change rather than an oppressive government that is constantly not allowing you to live in certain areas, not allowing you to congregate in the village. There's a better outcome of life for those types of people, and we think the benefit when it comes to wealth also exists to them, and I'll talk about that more in regards to what happens. Let's talk about how minority groups are actually going to work and how they function effectively after the Arab Spring. The fact of the matter is, we all have more information now and more direct knowledge of fundamentally what happens in these states. There's an inability of under any dictator state that the control of information is built in regards to rumour or innuendo in regards to how those minority groups and how they fundamentally oppress people. Mubarak has the ability to oppress minorities at will whenever it can. The international community didn't have the ability or the resources to actually change that. Under a post-Arabic state, we can now provide aid to those states, not conditional on who the leader is, but goes directly to women, Coptic Christians, and any other minority group that Abs and Tom wanted to talk about. That's the benefit we get directly for those minority groups to actually exist. But what? They can actually be in the media sphere, they can actually gain traction, they can go to the media, they can have some sort of discussion and communication that exists. If that's communication in domestic policies or it's with the international community, there's a benefit that exists for those minorities to actually have some sort of benefits between them. So thank you. Playing your head early is probably the most dangerous thing for those minorities. But the fact of the matter is, when you mobilise 14 million people, you're not playing your head early. The discussion becomes afterwards when what actually happens. No, thank you, but I'll take over.
Sure. Okay. How will you achieve long-term democracy if in places like Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood has rejected that idea because they've been thrown out of power and will never support it in the future?
Listen, every time Morsi made a decision that was slightly anti-democratic, that was against the ideas of participation, people protested in the street. Egypt's the exact same. Whenever there is a problem with regards to the framing of the constitution that limits power, when backroom deals are done, the people protest. Over time, if people continue to protest, governments have a self-interest in regards to having some sort of stable economy that actually exists and some sort of stable ability. Therefore, if they have that internal incentive to actually make those changes, they're more likely to listen. We never said it's perfect democracy. We said we get a benefit of participation, which everyone in this debate probably agrees that the people within those states actually want it. But let's talk about foreign policy and what actually happens. The fact of the matter is, the states in regards to accountability have the ability now to work with Western states. They're not as bad as we actually think they were. They're actually quite pragmatic in how it happened. We all thought the Muslim Brotherhood was going to allow Hamas to smuggle arms over the border, but they weren't, because there was an incentive for those governments to work with Western governments to make sure those things don't happen, because aid is conditional, support is conditional, but also in regards to how you're going to create a government structure is dependent on how you work with those other countries. There's a direct benefit in regards to foreign policy, in regards to negotiation that actually exists. Finally, in regards to the wealthy, because Arabs really didn't want to spend much time on it. We agree there's unemployment that exists at the moment. We acknowledge that from the beginning. But over the time, if you have more participation in an economy or in a voting sense, you always get some sort of benefit down the track. If you have the ability to own your own business now and your own industry, there is of course a benefit that fundamentally exists. This isn't the short-term gain in regards to comparing unemployment 5 years ago and unemployment now. It's over 30 years in the future where you can make those decisions and understand how the people affect it. But the people want this. So even if they're willing to be poor and unemployed, they made that choice that they wanted more participation. We are proud to oppose.